I'm gonna have an intentionally bad lighting yet somewhat effortful lighting in this video because reasons, and also because contrariness, and also because unironic effort. Nonetheless, that's what I'm saying. So, just for the video's sake. But this is gonna be a little different and interesting. We're gonna talk for 8 to 12 minutes or less about. Actually, it doesn't have to even take more than like 4 minutes again, but like the last video. But that was a little edited, so okay. Scriptless, but nonetheless. This has a kind of a script, but not really. But we're gonna talk about the three-way uh controversial, not conspirational, what the fuck. There goes monetization, okay. But like, potentially. We're gonna talk about this three-way cycle that I have with certain kinds of things I do, whether I like them or not. But yeah, here we go. Communication skills heading to expressive outlet, aka creative outlet, or aka outlets in general. How one self will make themselves known to be good about releasing their angst and expressions and all that stuff. So, the way that I tended to communicate at first, ever since I was born, I actually like when I was born, I actually didn't know how to communicate at all. So I had to go through like speech therapy and all that stuff, in order to figure out how to get me to talk because I could talk, I just didn't do it. And then I went from that to finally talking, and then talking was pretty moderate for years about, and then I talked. There was a point, as obviously you may have noticed at this point, that I eventually talked too much and too cryptically, and then it was like it went from that back into being more, not even in the humility sense, because I said before that humility can be a little back asswards, but like double-edged sword. It can be like a thing where you misunderstand it easily and not in the ways you would think. But I did have to practice more listening skills, so I went back into speaking less, if not at all, and that was gonna betray me in the future anyways, but for other reasons. But like I did that for a while, and then went back and talking more often, and then too much again, and then went back into talking less often, and so forth. And so this ebbed and flowed in different ways. With communication skills to my expressive outlet, it's more like I did have to express myself through my anti-clear and concise ways. And that could be standalone for its own reasons, but one more thing I'll say about it is that in order to be myself, I had to break the rules in terms of not just what I did unlawfully, and I never saw myself as a rule breaker. I saw myself as a professionalistic. I fetishized being a professionalist and a perfectionist. Now I fetishize even the results sometimes. I didn't believe in results up to this point, obviously, but for different reasons as well. But I did see myself as a professional, orderly person instead of a chaotic, liberating person. So there are things that even that don't relate to me so much all the time. But still, nonetheless, it's like my sense of communication being this sea of words and sea of expressionism, which is supposed to be the same relevant thing, not irrelevant. I love I have a problem with the word irrelevant and also a pleasure for it because it's like it's different things. It's like I have actually been able to debunk certain things for people. Like when they notice how I talk, they're like, "Wow, I got to be more patient, or I got to be more understanding of how people think." Sometimes, even as other psychologists would observe that to be, but being able to make an eloquent person look at me and think of me differently than them, there are differences between actual writers and people like me, but like there are differences, and it's not that concise isn't what they do or how they see the world or how I see the world, bad or good, whatever that's described as, but with communication skills to expressive outlet, it's like, yeah, I use my sense of communication to express myself, whether that was even remotely effective or even possible to decipher or whatever, or even take the time to understand if there even was enough time to understand all of what I said or whatever I explained or whatever I said or emphasized in what I did say or communicate otherwise. Communicating nonetheless. I used these communication skills as an expressive outlet of my own, and I don't regret doing that. I did that to express myself. It wasn't to communicate with others with a popular language. It wasn't to explain ideas that can be ping-ponged back and forth. It wasn't to have a form of exchange for things that the world only cares about results and has a way to make it look like you know what you're doing, or even factually, logically prove that you know what you're doing. My communication skills were my expressive outlet, whether that made sense or not. So I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be angry, but just, I wanted to emphasize those weird, interesting, exchanging words for some reason. As I'm literally explaining this right now, in the reality of this game. Yeah. So downwards we got expressive outlet to game changing. And my idea of being an expressive outlet can be really, really controversial and deep, and even concerning, because some of the things I do that are my passions and hobbies, because I always debunked like claymation as not always being necessarily being a passion or hobby, because I had a different way of explaining hobby and full-time job or full-time career and hobbies, fun hobbies. I didn't always explain those things, but my expressive outlet being either things like talent, not passion, claymation, or passion, not talent, philosophy, etc., etc. But even with philosophy, people think of philosophy being textbook philosophy or even things like philosophical beliefs, but they never think about things you do like illegal or taboo activities like doxing or stealing or cheating or doing other not even just illegal activities, but just rule breaking activities, like things like you wouldn't think of being allowed. Like with my expressive outlet being a game changer, the way that I express myself, the way that I truly become happy by doing what makes me happy without hurting myself or others, actually hurts other people and myself. Now let me explain this real quick before I get kicked off the platform. No, well, like it's like I'm already banned from YouTube now. It's like, but like just but the things that hopefully don't hurt people myself, that could or could not make me happy, they are things that I believe or even did unfortunately did hurt myself and other people, which did get me in trouble in certain ways that I didn't have to get in trouble for, but those were the only ways I could make myself happy that I could think of at the point. There are things that this connects to that makes it really, really sad and tragic. Like when I thought there was a strategy I was doing to not to sometimes being overthought, but even if it wasn't being overthought, it was like strategies for things I thought they were the only way I could do something to problem solve. And my attempts to problem solve in my own image were actually screwing people over, and people thought that was not necessary, but in my mind it was. So there's a long story about that. In fact, there's even reason why I explained like the 4 parts to every story instead of 2. There's a reason why that wasn't even my idea. Someone told me that before, and I thought that was pretty beautiful. It was like the main party, the third party, the externals, and the non-relevance. I think it was. It's something like that. That's really beautiful. I can expand that later if I need to, but the non-relevance can help themselves, because they can do little trivial details that can be really, really important. You never know that shit. So it's like, with my expressive out being a game changer, there were things I did that were not necessary, if not weren't allowed, that were game changing, but they were not necessarily to only be controversial for the sake of being controversial, but to actually express myself and to actually be myself and to be comfortable with who I was and accept myself. The people who told me that I was hard on myself or too hard on myself, I didn't completely disbelieve them or didn't listen to them. I knew what they meant, but I didn't think that was too even relevant to me. But it was like this thing where I didn't know how. Oh, the way it meant, okay. I didn't know how to believe them too much because I knew what they meant, but it was like I wasn't trying to be hard on myself. But with the expressive outlet to game changing, whenever I was being self-expressive and self-accepting, too much liberation versus too much order. And I thought, and again, as I was saying at the last point, I see myself as an orderly person versus a chaotic person, but I am actually more chaotic than orderly. And there's a bit of a imbalance between those two. However, I'll overcomplicate or overthink that. But as an expressive outlet to game changer, some of the things I do that even are allowed and are okay, that do express myself, they're not always how I see myself. And so when I do claymation or even philosophy, those are things I actually didn't have to see as passions or talents or hobbies or full-time stuff. I didn't have to be like that. But there were very unfortunate ways this happened, and even some very fortunate ways this happened. You never really know for sure. But so we'll go to the next one, and the final one is game changing to, communication skills. We're going full circle now. So with that one, I'll show you the whole page from this one. That's the October 11th, 2022. With game changing to communication skills, because this will go full circle to the other item, which was expressive outlet. So like, game changing to communication skills. How is this different from the first item, if not the second item? Now, so the game changing communication skills. So this is gonna make you guys very interested and fascinated with this. Poetry and philosophy and abstract art and all that. Things where you're allowed to break the mold and be yourself and be godly, chaotic and all that. Things where people allow you to be... even going to that junkyard and hitting a car with a mallet and people telling you, no, that's a wasted car. You get to do that. It's anger management. Stuff like that. And being expressive in a free field, even your own mind, in certain ways for therapy, meditation, all that, psychotherapy. People who allow you to be like that, even online therapy and physical therapy, all that stuff, being your true self in a certain environment, even having people who make communities, like on YouTube, people who make communities for being yourself and being with other people who are like-minded, or even not like-minded, but still a safe haven. Even that, as simple as cliche as that is, it's true. But it's like, for those game changers, guess what I end up doing sometimes? At least sometimes. You guessed it. Being communicative and properly discussion-oriented. Now, why the fuck would I do that? Yeah, you ask. Why would I try to actually be a rational person, an actual normal person, when I should, of all things, use that situation to be my chaotic self for once, which I never had a chance to before in other normal situations? I do this because I either already fulfilled the chaos that I needed but ahead of time, or I gained actual respect and responsible nature for the things and people that gave me this chance to begin with. I gained enough actual, not even the controversial respect and responsibility I see it as a different way for a different perspective. The chaos I see of, oh, I don't believe in responsibility and respect. No, I actually have respect and responsibility for those people and things. So to the point where if I either had the chaos ahead of time to express myself and to communicate my own beliefs and philosophies and shit, I was able to do that ahead of time, so that by the time it came down to being able to be myself for once in a free environment, I still wanted to be normal and proper and make the effort to change myself for the right reasons at the wrong time. And if that makes any of this different, communication skills to expressive outlet, going down to expressive outlet to game changing, going down to game changing communication skills, which comes back to the full circle of expressive outlet and game changing communication skills. That's why I do that.